Hey, Mike. Mike, let me know if you can hear me, man. I'm trying to get my video unmuted here. I don't know why
Yep,
why it muted on me there. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. There we go. That should work. All right, good deal. We're just waiting on Craig to join us.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, Mike, I blanked that. I mean, it is what it is, and it's a discovery phase. I think we can benefit more from the actual board right now, so it's good to still have it regardless.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Yeah, that happens, John. It
Yes.
takes a while to get used to all the ins and outs of board policies and rules, and it'll become second nature before long. But I'm glad you caught it, because if you hadn't caught it and somebody else would have, then
Yeah.
different deal.
Yeah, no, it's usually where I get distracted, like somebody calls or comes in, and unfortunately, yeah, that gets thought process. So I gotta get a little bit more active on that.
No problem. That's all good.
See if I can up my audio a little bit here. I want to do that. Yeah, I didn't hear back from Craig when I told him we could reschedule, so I assume he's going to join us.
See what happens, I guess.
Let's see. Yeah, I think I see him in the waiting room if I can get to it here. This is like operating a Chinese battleship. Yeah, Craig's here.
Improvement District, this is Connie. How can you help me?
Hey, Craig, can you hear us and see us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Let me
Good
make
deal.
sure. You can hear me?
Yeah, sure can. Well, I apologize for not having everybody here, but I think we're probably the next best thing with Mike and I to get some initial information that we can pass along.
Okay, that sounds good. Sounds like a plan. See, Mike's on already as well.
Yeah, he is.
So it'll just be us?
Yep.
Yeah. That way we can just follow the rules for the public meeting deal that we deal with as a special district.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Yeah, and I'm recording it too. Alexa asked me to record to share, so that way they can still get the full effect of the meeting without, being present at the time, so that it still accomplishes the goal here. So
All right.
that's a good part about it.
Yep, sounds like a plan. So I'll let you guys, I guess, or Mike, you called this meeting to order a little bit to meet with me to just discuss, I think, high level of what you're looking for in the study, and get my thoughts. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, and so I can give you a little bit of background. So TUID was formed, I think, back in 2012. Previously, it was operated by different mining companies that owned the mining rights to a mine north of town there.
Okay.
The last mine that came through decided not to continue supporting the community, and so that's why TUID was formed. We have a totally new board, and in fact, a lot of the members of the original board are moved on, and so we really don't have any good structure on how the rates were established, other than to, of course, provide enough budget money to, fill the tanks with diesel and different things like that. So I think what would be good for TUID in the future is a solid understanding of what it takes, not only to keep diesel in the tanks, but provide maintenance and services and just overall cost of service.
Okay. If I recall correctly, it's been a while since we chatted, all of us. I remember chatting, it's been months since I had a group call with you guys before we had more people that were on the committee or board at that point in time. My understanding of your system is it's run on diesel generation. You're not tied into anybody outside source. So all your production expenses are within that generation, that diesel generation, and you're vertically integrated, so to speak. You have the generation and you take it all the way to distribution level to the customer.
That's correct.
So
Water, sewer, and electric.
yep. So from a cost of service perspective, if I also recall correctly, I think you really only have one rate. If I'm remembering, I could be wrong, one or two rates. If I recall that you charge your customers, is that correct, or is there more than, or there was an option of buying or being in a specific block of usage? That's I apologize, I'm working off memory for a little bit, but if I remember, there was one or two rates, but one of them was specific if you were to buy a certain block of energy each month.
Yeah, that's correct. And John, you can jump in here anytime. You kind of are real familiar with the rate schedules now.
Yeah, Craig, to kind of break it down, the two major categories are residential and commercial rates. And then within that is exactly what you said. You can break it down into block rates. They call them a budget rate. You know, the base is 55 cents an hour, straight kilowatt hours, but you can, yeah, sort of pre-purchase with a yearly limit. You know, like one of them's a 2,400 kilowatt hour. Then when you go over that, you pay, you know, over that amount. But
Yes.
for doing that, you get a little bit of a break on the kilowatt hour rates. You know, they go down from 55 down to 37 cents an hour. So they vary within there too.
And so you're giving them, in my sense, when I hear that, if it declines down if you buy in bigger blocks. And so for you, the price point says that you're running the system, you're not worried about capacity of the system per se. You're worried about them using more load, so your cost per generation unit goes down. That's why you're offering them a declining budget buy-in, basically, in my mind. To me, that means that your generation capacity, you don't see it as any issue at this point in time because you have enough to serve that little area you're serving. That's just high level. When on a declining purchase price, that's the way I look at it, because it's basically economically that fixed cost of that plant that you guys spent. The more people use, the quicker you pay off those fixed costs.
Yeah, I would think so. And that's just still the way I see it now too, at that high level.
Yeah.
And that's a limited understanding, you know, from being newer to this role. But I would summarize it the same way you have, you know, so far. And part of that too is, you know, I still want to know, to answer that accurately. Be one of my questions, with a rate study would, you know, be able to look at what we're actually producing. I don't know if we can look at waste. I think that probably takes something more specialized to see,
Yeah.
you know, where your waste is going. And I know, Mike, we talked about even, you know, power quality meters for that too. But yeah, basically, Craig, that's the way it seems to be angled, that there is some over generation, you know, because of the way things are set up in the population that dictate that.
It really comes to the fact is like a plant investment related to that plant investment, whatever that's built into the rate, because of your cost of that plant that's still out there. If there's debt on there, etc., we call fixed costs related to that plant.
Oh yeah, they're there.
It's declining the blocks, because every unit that you sell, the more you get your people to buy, the more you pay off that debt quicker, basically, cover that fixed cost. There is the other side of things that Mike would probably agree with me on, the operation side of things, the maintenance side of things. That's an increasing cost type of deal, because if you think about it, you're small though, but in just general sense, payroll costs keep going up. Material, like those type of things, aren't a declining block or a declining block type of rate. So you got a divergent deal, but your overall declining block, because your fixed costs in the plant are probably way more than what the other costs are, that's why it's that way. So I'm just giving you a little, just without opening your books and stuff. These are my initial thoughts. I may see differently when I look at stuff, but this is me just shooting from the hip based on discussion.
Yeah, I agree. And then we have, I guess you would call it a fixed cost too. It's a semi-recurring fixed cost and it's where we're at now as a rebuild cost. We do know that at 20,000 hours, the generators are due for a rebuild. So that would obviously be classified in there somewhere. It is a known cost, but it does, it's not on an annual basis, but it does
No,
recur.
it's a future cash outlay. So
Yeah.
I think in this study, what you really have going on, it's a lot of it's really big picture driven, because we'll get into the rate side of things some, but you only have two classes. So you're going to allocate costs to commercial and residential, and basically you're going to have the two classes to allocate to. But what it comes down to is basically how far out do we want to look? Like we do a cost service study, you take a test year, like your most recent fiscal year ending. That's your starting point. You get all the billing data related to it. You get all that stuff that's related to that test year. Then I start pro forma years after that. So I'd be like, okay, next pro forma year, what's our budget? Basically, just that first then we do an escalation factor so many years out that we want to go. I mean, that could be 10 years or something. I typically haven't done more than like 5 to 10 years. Basically, we just look at your previous expenses and then look at the escalation from there. Look at the amortization schedule and the debt, basically. But the thing I want to point out is that rebuild, if we have it within our year, our window, our forward-looking window, I don't know where you're at unrelated to how many years to do a rebuild. We need to put that CapEx expense in there, basically, and look at how cash poor that makes us that particular year. And you might want to set you could set a rate up if you're not have enough cash in the coffers to handle it, to have something that picks it up. And you can even I've seen this in Oregon when it comes to like water rates and stuff, where they need to build a new treatment plant. They set this rate up basically to build the fund up that they will need based on the estimated cost if they don't have the cash value to do it, and set a restricted fund up basically from collecting on it, even though it's not energized, but you got to repair it just to prepare for it if you don't have the cash at this point. Because if you do that, you can sunset it after you get the plant built and then not have to worry about that type of thing later on.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's where we're at now, is looking for cash to accommodate two rebuilds. So it would make us cash poor to do both of them that are needed. So that definitely relates and is important and pertinent.
I think that's going to be the utmost important thing out of this whole thing, that piece. Just your general costs as they are now, but also your capital expenditure outlays. Are we going to be able to cover them in the future at rates? And a big one like that, you could set some special rate up for it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that's similar. I don't know if and they're probably semantically interchanged. One of the things we were looking at that I know Mike's going to ask this too is we call it a diesel surcharge, which was a fuel cost.
Yes.
And part of that would also serve as maybe to go to that fund. It's tricky because it may actually have to go to diesel, but I've seen other utilities call it a surcharge, but they framed it with catastrophic failure versus planning, but they sound similar. I mean, it's still a need.
Term. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have for the diesel you're buying to operate, do you have some type of any mechanism to protect you from just cost escalation from your consumers, to help them pick up if diesel's more expensive at one point, that you'd be able to pick up? Or is that are you reactionary to the price of the fuel?
Yeah, we're reactionary right now. We're looking, and it's going to depend on what conditions and rules allow us to do. I reached out to two of our suppliers to see about a contract.
Okay.
And that would probably give us some indication, but they use Opus price index, so that's still going to vary. I'm still
course.
ignorant as to how, how that's going to help us anticipate, or if it will too. But no, that we're reactionary to any of the
Well,
costs. Yeah.
I find in the natural gas or any gas business, any type of forward-looking stuff I look for is not pretty worthless after a year or two.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, because heck, half the time some war breaks out, then you got a gas price
Yeah.
going up, and you're like, that had
Yep.
nothing to do with our supply and production type of stuff, other than some crap happening to affect it. So that
Exactly. Yep.
typically it's tough. What I was thinking was, so as you guys act as a generator yourself, when a generator sells to an electric co-op, they have what they call a fuel charge. Like, so the supplier to the co-op, and the co-op brings the power to the distribution. So that's the tier typically. Very few co-op or municipals and co-ops, etc., are vertically integrated completely. If some are vertically integrated, they're technically buying a share of a plant from someone else and are getting billed on that. You guys own it. Basically, you have no other supplier. So in theory, what I'm getting at is, there's a way maybe to charge a fuel charge or have it broken out on the bill that allows you to deal with escalation of fuel costs. So if you're paying 55 cents, the base fuel cost is like whatever, so many cents per kilowatt hour. Anything above that, you can collect that inflation maybe in the month that you need to collect it. It could be a headache though as well, because it is an extra thing to monitor as you charge that. But that's it's almost like a power cost adjustment to your end users to protect you from fuel escalation each month, or potentially each month. If it's above base, what's in base, say we ended up having 20 cents per kilowatt hour in our base 55-cent rate, and next month is 25 cents, you're going to collect the 5 cents to make yourself whole that month.
Yeah.
Basically, that's really what it does. That's a thought, because you are buying the fuel, and your cash flow could be problematic in a year that if you just have it in base rates and you have no mechanism to collect the inflation without just going to the council board to change rates. That's the thing. That's what I was getting at. I didn't know if you had that already, but it's something to maybe think about as you're
Yeah, that's kind of where we've structured it now. We structured it at, $3 a gallon for diesel to balance our budget. And anything above that $3 per gallon is an additional surcharge on the
Okay.
price per kilowatt hour per plant.
Excellent.
And that will always be collecting in the rears. So there won't ever be a situation where we've collected too much money and have to pay it back.
Okay.
I think
so you have it in place. It's just looking back. So you have a little bit of a lag in your collections.
yeah, that's what we're proposing. We haven't implemented this yet.
Okay, that's fine. Then I'm looking. So you would do that on an annual basis?
Monthly, I think.
Monthly? Okay, good.
Quarterly.
Okay. I want to ask that because obviously the longer horizon you work with, the more cash risk you have. So if you're collecting at the month, you have less cash risk, basically.
Isn't that what your thoughts are, John, as far as that?
Yeah, and what I did, Mike and Craig, is again we use a benchmark of 80,000 gallons a year consumption. That's intentionally a little high to sort of cushion that. Obviously you'd rather come in lower than an expense in a budget. So I built that in a little bit high, but yeah, $3 was a trigger in the formula, and it's still on paper now because we see the need for that. But yeah, but the three, we didn't average that. I think our average cost per gallon, ending in 23 is going to be 356 ish type of deal. So yeah, it's still, would be a trigger there with that.
Yeah. So you have a standard cost basically in your budget of so many gallons at this dollar amount per gallon. And so you have something and you budget for it. So you're trying to have something to apply that would basically make you whole, looking at arrears on a monthly basis if the per gallon is different, basically.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
That's correct. Hey, will your guys' study look at our water and sewer as well?
I can put all three together in one study.
I think that would be good, you know, and we do trash. We collect all the trash at one location and then transport it to landfill. And,
Okay.
you know, keep empty containers for the people in the community. And then another question I had, you know, what really determines a fair rate structure in a situation where, you know, we've got a large commercial, we've got 8 or 9 full-time residents, and the rest are vacation homeowners.
Well, the seasonal aspect of your system. So you're basically telling me your whole system's seasonal with a commercial customer, basically
Sure.
in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It makes it, here's the issue with seasonal. You don't have a rate breakout for seasonal, basically, but you got the two you know, you got the two commercial and the standard residential. Your seasonal is a seasonal residential. The one thing that you're all kilowatt hour based. If I remember right, everything's kilowatt hour based. They can buy in for, you know, like, as you guys are talking about different tiers. Your seasonal folks will never buy as much as the 9 residential folks that are there, because they're not there all year round.
That's correct.
My assumption is you broke seasonal out. It depends on how your rate's set. If that 55 cents, that number they're paying up front for the lower tier, is that collecting enough for them needing the fixed distribution plant and everything fixed there for them for the full year? So if their average, because their average usage, if you divide by, you know, if you were to look at it from an annual perspective, they're lesser than the 9 customers that are full time, basically. Sure. And so that's where the study, if we wanted to monitor seasonal, we probably want to tag seasonal. We probably want regular residential and seasonal just to see, obviously, and then allocate the cost and see how much with the lesser usage if we have a margin problem there. If we have a margin problem there, we can then we have justification maybe to do something a little bit different for seasonal customers.
Yeah, so right now, most of the seasonal, including myself,
Yeah,
I just go on the straight kilowatt hour plan, which is 55 cents.
Yes.
I pay more than anybody else for the kilowatt hour, but I don't use.
No, is that enough though? I don't know
use.
if what your 55 cents, what your usage there while you're there temporary, if that's cutting it for the full year, the full fixed cost that's sitting there for the you have people working year round. I'm assuming you have plant available year round. Is it covering the fixed cost when the 55 cents itself with your lower usage? That's the question.
Okay.
Yeah, and Craig, I don't know if we told you this. We have something similar to that in place now, and it's a question of equity or inequity, like Mike is alluding to. So we have what's called a standby fee, and what that is, if you own a lot here, you pay a base fee even with no utilities at all. And we have broken that out, and it's needed. So what you're saying with a seasonal is sort of a continuation or yet another subcategory of that.
Yes.
And it does, you know, it does raise questions of inequity, but we're so unique. You know, we may set a benchmark for a rate study unlike anybody's ever seen because of that, you know, with the, you know, transient and seasonal and, you know, property owners. And that brings up a lot of debate. But yeah, for me, breaking out just the standby, it's actually needed. So that may fit what you just brought up too with that category. There may have to be, you know, that category, but our goal is to bring in an outside source with you know, expertise and credibility, so it doesn't seem like it's something that's, you know, home cooking, for lack of a better, you know, better term.
I would think we'd do ourselves disservice if we didn't break out the seasonal just to look at it and allocate to it, see if that usage that seasonal is doing is picking up the cost for it. Does it need an additional base charge because or do we need to raise the the flat fee for the seasonal people higher to cover the cost? That's going to be the question that they have to answer in the study.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, we're trying to attract new people to move down there and build
Yes.
a house. And we're probably not going to attract permanent residents. We're going to be attracting
I
people
know.
that live next to Lake Powell and go out on the boat. And so, it's kind of a juggle while we're trying to get this influx to help take the cost of everything down, but it's kind of unattractive if we jack the seasonal way up.
Yeah,
And they can't afford to pay it when they're not there.
the study's scientific, Mike. So the study might say there's a lower rate or lower margin as a percent of revenue or lower rate of return on seasonal. It may not, but it may. You don't. The study being a science tells you that the study rates, though, aren't necessarily a science because of what you just said. There's political or economical ramifications of anything you do. So you have to weigh the science with what we see as an item of issue like that. If you want to attract people, the science might tell you one thing to be a lot higher, but we may not be able to go that far. But you at least have a benchmarking tool to say, well, maybe I should bump this a little bit, basic. Yeah. And that's how I handle the rate side of things. The science tells me where we're at. The rates sometimes are a bit of a, you have to you try your best to match the science, but you can't always do it completely.
Yeah, I think we fall into that where it's going to be, even a bigger gray area.
Yeah.
And two things. Yeah, Mike, first of all, before I regress, what you brought up about the study on, sewer and water and even trash in the landfill, I think that's a great idea. We tend to forget about that, but that is nonetheless important. That I won't say it would support electricity, but it needs to carry its weight at the very least.
Yes.
And that's something we don't
When
pay
you-
attention to. So
When you look at those,
I would agree, even in an extra cost, I think there's a cost benefit there to do that. I didn't think about that, but
Well, what it would do, you have a full all-in study.
Yeah.
I can look at the returns by department.
Yeah.
And so now you're not looking just at the rates, you're looking at department. Maybe electric's bringing in more money as a profit compared to, or as a margin compared to the other two, or maybe vice versa. So you get that benefit. Now, the one tricky thing on those is you might ask for my opinion on this, but you share joint costs with those other departments. So we'll have to come up, if you're not allocating them already yourself on there, like admin in general, we're going to have to come up with an allocation factor to fair and equitably allocate joint costs between these departments.
Yeah.
Which I've dealt with before, but we got to deal with that in the study.
Yeah, that'd be good to have.
Kind of seeing going forward is, water and sewer don't take a lot of, they don't have a big cost to them. We actually pump water out of a well, feed the system, a little bit of maintenance, probably more maintenance in water than there is even is in sewer. They go through and flush the sewer out and once in a while do some maintenance on the ponds, but that excess revenue really can offset some losses on the electrical end if we have a failure.
Yes.
But I want to see how it all works together and how it should work together.
Now, on your staffing that you have, you're small. So does one person that's, your operations and maintenance folks or your staff that we'd allocate the cost, that one person might do every department, basically, is what I'm getting at. Even from an O&M standpoint, I was talking just direct administrative in general, but from an O&M, but you guys probably don't know how much that person spends in one department or the other in time, or do you?
Yeah. We'd have a pretty good idea to allocate it. Craig, and the unique situation we're at, we run it as a management company. So we have a fixed fee that TUID pays the management company.
Okay.
That could be broken down to a formula. And also, too, the main cost to address goes back to what you said about the power plant or fixed costs. We have capital bonds for the water and the sewer.
Oh,
So
good.
that,
Okay.
yeah, so that would be something, those costs would be, the first and foremost cost is, are we covering them? And then go down to allocation, as
Yes.
far as labor, spent from there too.
Anything that we would directly allocate that we know it's a direct and attributable cost to the department, we get that first. And anything that we're not sure of or it's not direct, then we got to figure out how to allocate it, basically.
Well, I'll add too, this goes back, skipping back to the category of customer. I would say, like Mike said, he's not here all the time, but Mike's almost a subcategory of the part-time, because Mike doesn't rent his house. We do have part-timers that do.
Okay.
So as a model, when I worked for Airmark down the road, they charged a energy fee. So they were able to pass some of that expense along. And that's a tough one. Again, you probably get out of the realm of science, but
Yes.
you would almost, does that make sense? You almost break down into subcategories, as there's people who own vacation homes, they don't rent them. So Mike's not alone in that. But
Okay.
there are people that do own them and rent them. So at least from our standpoint, if somebody's renting one, you say,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
you can recover that cost. But you're telling guys like Mike, well, you're stuck with that cost. So that's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
which is understandable.
yeah, at least we're, it's painful, but at least we're defining that, through the use of science and analysis. So I
Yeah,
think
that's what
that's
we're
a
gonna
good
have
thing
to
too.
do a little bit of and things. So what you're saying is some of the folks that have their home, it's actually it looks more like a full-time residence that they're renting more during the year.
Yeah,
They're running
exactly.
Airbnb
Yeah.
or whatever they're doing with this stuff. Okay.
Yep.
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 And we've
Exactly.
got we've got a power plant with uh 4 different generators. Basically, we've got a small generator for now when the loads are down.
Yeah.
It saves us a lot in fuel. And then as loads kick up, when the on season comes up, the commercial starts to pick up, things start to happen. We start switching up to generators that are bigger.
Yep.
And so there's going to be a lot of different parts and pieces to this that I think
That,
we'll have to consider in the full range.
no, that makes sense. You're basically, like you stated here, basically a seasonal community for the most part, essentially. In large scale on there. Is your commercial obviously more tied into seasonal than as well? Is because you brought that up, but in reality it would be. If this is an area people are going for the lake or the area, it's more like it's not where I grew up is sort of similar, like a little different somewhat because they didn't have their own power, but Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri is a huge vacation lake spot where the numbers and the population spikes considerably in the summer. It's the same animal, basically, just a little different than you guys in terms of they have a firm power agreement with someone else. But yeah, that's what it's sounding like to me completely what we're dealing with here.
It is. We've changed a little in the off-road sector, because of the trails, but not enough to where you can't still call it. I call it a lake-based economy,
Yeah.
and it is
Okay.
summer and still, based around Lake Powell. A little bit of change into the early fall for off-roaders, and then dead in the winter. But yeah, absolutely. Exactly what you're saying, Craig. That's a good analogy to Lake of the Ozarks.
I mean, there's more than just like the Ozarks out there. There's quite a few communities like that around the
Yeah,
area that
yeah,
just spike up. You guys are just smaller and a little bit smaller in scale,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah. And
exactly.
another thing I'd really like to address, I work for a power utility.
Mhm.
So another thing I think of a lot is, what's our future plan here? There might be mining growth, there might be resort growth. There's always that ongoing maintenance need. We've done a lot of really good maintenance in the last 20 years in Tickaboo. I think they've replaced a lot of the electrical infrastructure, the main primary cables and different things. But there's some projects that we know we really need to do to fix power quality. And then there's some older lines that still need replaced. What would be the best way to set that up on like a 5-year plan and start, identifying those costs that may happen, the unexpected and the expected? How do we deal with those in the rate study?
In the co-op world, Mike, you deal with those 5-year work plans at that scale where you're looking at stuff like get the take a look at the distribution line and everything and see what potential issues there are with the current capacity levels on feeds and build it, see where your system needs to be. But it's typically in the co-op world, they do like a 5-year plan. In the municipal world, they do the same type of planning at times and stuff. Now, as far as me, I'm not an engineer background by nature. I'm familiar with what goes on in the work planning. I won't have a good feel for like, okay, where you're, how's your system laid out, what should be done looking out five years. That I won't touch. I'm more, and when I'm doing this, it's more than just a pure financial standpoint. But the way you probably asked me this is there anything outside the production, your generation plant you need to worry about big scale as well? And I won't be able to dig that out as easy because without looking at your system, I don't know. Yeah, is this feed got an issue? The way it's set up, is there an issue here long term, essentially?
I think our biggest problem with power quality and the issues we have is the voltage that our system operates at is way too high. It's a 14,000 volt system when it should
Oh,
be
really?
200 volt system. Yeah.
Okay.
So in my mind, coming from my engineering background,
Yes.
I automatically roll to, we need to start converting the system back down to a lower voltage.
Wow, I'm not used to what you just said there from a small community. I'm used to voltages being too low or the system built too low than a co-op. Well, I run into a lot of where co-ops will want where a municipal want to be bought by a co-op to get out from under, take care, having to deal with the day-to-day cost of running their system. Always the biggest problem with those in general, in my experience, always the voltage levels are too low to match up to the co-op standards, basically. But I haven't heard that. This is the first time I've heard someone tell me the other way around.
Back in the day, back in the 70s when Tikaboo was built, it was the mining heyday.
Yeah.
And, mines use that.
Oh yeah, that makes sense
a lot. So it made sense, and it was the new sexy thing. It was everybody wanted the 14,424 system because you could carry voltage on an overhead power line for miles and miles and miles without needing something out there to jack it up at the end.
Yes, exactly.
But on a small underground distribution system, it's just a big capacitor. It just sits there and builds.
Yeah.
And causes a lot of problems. So back to my thought though, is that might be something we want to look at in a 5 to 10 year plan and start mitigating some of those issues.
Yeah, and you know what? I can tie, as we're looking at the financial aspect of it, I can tie in Adam, one of our engineers, to chat more about this. I mean, we come up with estimated costs for what I told you before, the opposite, the increase the voltage on the system. You're dealing with a similar thing in nature to decrease. You have to change some things out and some stuff. So maybe we have some decent back of the napkin type estimates. We know what costs are generally in stuff per foot. Labor costs vary a lot around the country and stuff. That's the bigger issue. Materials. There's some differences in material overhead and things of that nature, but not so much on there from experience. But it's really labor intense.
And we work with a good contractor in Utah, and they could also give us a lot of valuable. And they worked on the system long enough; they know what needs to be done too. So they could
and that may be a way to look at first, just outside of get a feel from them at what it would do. It's gonna it'd be interesting what you come up with, what ends up being. Anytime you're trying to convert a small system, it's always, the price tags gets pretty extreme when doing some stuff these days.
Unless you can phase it out.
You have to do something of that nature.
Yep, just do a section at a time and slowly start phasing it down.
Yeah, you would have to do something of that nature.
Yeah. What about, so we've been talking a lot about, we're looking for grant money for PV systems with batteries to reduce generator runtime, different things for the whole system. So what are your thoughts on that? I'll just give you my first thought. My first thought is go ahead and get a diesel generated rate established, and then anything we do on top of that's going to make it better. But that's just my thought.
I would concur there. Have you dug into the grant money at all? I know they had funding, the first phase of funding on the, and why is the name, is it GRIP funds or whatever, that people have been trying to do. Co-ops haven't had much luck with it because they want to do, it seems like the government wants to deal with consortiums, meaning a group of folks coming in to get the grant. It doesn't mean everybody in the group gets it, but they don't want to have like multi points of contact. But I agree with you on the diesel rate, to have to get that set first, basically, and then build, whatever you get, to help, basically help you with mitigation of cost. I mean, batteries and such to help store and what you need to do with it may help you reduce your costs going forward. That's a secondary thing once you're able to get that grant or get that funding established. But they haven't been those GRIP funds. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about grant wise. People had more success with fire mitigation the first round than anything else, is what I've been told. But that doesn't mean the government's not going to switch to something else going forward.
Sure.
In things. I don't know how much you've looked into that stuff at this point in time yet or not, but I'm assuming that's the funding you're talking about, the infrastructure. That's the infrastructure driven funding from the
Yes.
the EV infrastructure fund, I'll call it, or whatever we called that fund.
Yep. We're really looking for anything we can get.
Yeah, Teresa works with, we have grant expertise. I don't do the grant writing. Teresa does, who works with me in the financial area here. Anytime you guys want to chat with her in general about it, she's our internal expert in the area.
Okay.
I hear enough to know somewhat what to talk about, but I don't get into the weeds with it completely. She does.
Sure.
She's very well versed. We have actually I think we have about 5 or 6 people now on staff just in that area.
Okay.
All types of grants. We do like civil type grants and different things, not all electrical.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And Craig, we've done a little. We've gone through one that's a DOE final decision, but we had to do an interview to proceed to the next phase for applying. But it's a smaller grant. I think 80 to 100,000. And some of the new BBB stuff is you have to be in disadvantaged areas, which we're not. The county below us is Kane County, but Garfield is not, which is odd.
That is crazy.
I know, but in reality, we're certainly disadvantaged in many ways. But like you said, grant writing is its own full-time field. So that would be good to have that, that expertise, and maybe something we would be interested in.
Yeah. I feel like if there's certain things you're interested in that I can, as we're doing the financial analysis, the cost service analysis, I can patch Teresa in for some questions if you have some things and you want her to do, you guys can sort of work out a scope on that side of things a little bit, but I want to have her in the conversation.
We've actually, kind of on that note, we've actually talked to one energy provider that was interested in doing a PPE, which made it sound like they were going to obviously build the facilities. But my last conversation with them sounded like they'd rescinded that funding was an issue.
Okay.
So that's not really, that's just been talked to this point.
I was wondering about that, in terms of your location has probably forced your hand. Well, the way it started off with the mining coming in there almost started you off in the place of having your own generation. Yeah. Frankly, it sounds like. I was always curious, last time we talked is like, I don't, is it worth to have your own generation if you can have someone else get it to you, basically? And that's always the question at hand is it our own better than just buying it from someone else on a purchase power agreement situation? But maybe you're sort of also isolated a bit too, is that right?
Yeah, it's like 60 miles.
Yeah, you're isolated, and that doesn't help you one bit.
No, I think getting it, I think Alexa mentioned it was something like 80 million to get it via power line, so that's prohibitive. So whatever, for PPA to ever be in place, it would take something like a PV battery facility to be built here.
Yeah.
And I think that could be prohibitive too, because they're average cost that we've seen is like 3.7 million, some odd, $3 to $4 million.
Well, the problem
So
is
that's,
getting transmission line over to you,
yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
the issue. Transmission line's not cheap to build per mile, and you're miles out from the near, that's the problem.
Yep. Well, and they've been talking about it since the 80s.
yeah.
Yeah,
And, back then it was 3 million and it was too much. So,
yeah.
you
Things
just
are,
see how that goes.
I know it's out of hand. Yeah, that prohibits a lot of that. I mean, it makes sense based on how you guys started the way that you are, because where you're isolated some. Plant was built initially with the mining operations. The mining operations they've ceased completely, basically.
It's kind of a weird deal. So it's uranium mining, and it kind of comes and goes and ebbs and flows. They'll come in and they'll get some investors, they'll come in and do a bunch of work and build some infrastructure, and then it just depends on the price of uranium. If the price starts going down and they run out of money,
They're
they
like
sell it
anything.
to somebody else and they come in and start, it's just kind of
Yeah.
ebb and flow. But
Yep.
I always think if we could ever catch them at the right time when they've got the funding, we could add them as a consumer and
Yeah.
avoid them having to provide their own generator power. That would help us.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and what we heard, Craig, is that the US had that program with Russia called megawatts for megatons, where we were buying the disassembled weapon uranium, and then that's gone away from what I understand, or was imminent, and that was supposedly pushing, the next boom in the boom and bust cycle of energy. And so there have been stirrings, and Mike knows better than me, with people doing core samples, and there's
Okay.
rumors, both ways. The last rumor I heard is exactly what Mike just said, that this group is in here, but they're also looking for investors to come in to boost, what they're going to do. So then I've heard that next year was going to take off. Yeah, it's certainly an unknown, but Mike
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
that earlier too, that it was something we would look at, as maybe a what if, and it could certainly be, I would think, more of a positive thing, because that's what I mean. That's the legacy of Tickaboo. The power plant was owned by the mine and handed
Yes.
over, and
Yep.
so is the majority of the housing. So we're a mining legacy. So
Yep. It's interesting. So uranium mining,
yes.
huh?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Long history, and from several of the roads were built by the AEC, and their
That is
stories.
interesting.
I think part of near us, there's a site on the San Rafael Swell called Temple Mountain, and I believe the uranium for some of the original atomic bombs were taken from Temple Mountain from here.
Interesting.
Read
No,
the history.
that's unique. I didn't realize that's something. Learned something new today.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting.
Yep. So yeah, what other things you have, John?
Craig, to sum it up, it's almost like a New York City size order in a town the size of Tickaboo. So that it's complex, and again, it's due to the history that we discussed and the makeup of I call it a transient community, because that's what we call water systems. That's how we classify them. So I've come to call it transient. Yeah, and I think we need to sort it out, and like Mike has alluded to, that we get a good grasp on it, and that we're given direction, from science. And then our other unique challenge is the politics and the fact that we're a public utility. We need to present this to people with credibility too. That's why we're looking too, that I mentioned home cooking, that it's not made up. And that seems to be, depending on who you talk to, whoever's affected the most, people feel like they carry the burden. The full-time residents feel like they carry the burden.
Yeah.
Our commercial, feels like they do. So it'd be good to, have objectivity, and then other than objectivity, the facts and the analysis to support, that too is what we're looking for.
Yep.
I think what we've touched on covers a lot of it, between the present and the future, like Mike has talked about too. And I'll just say again, I like the idea of including the other utilities in with that. I think they're important but overlooked. And I'm guilty of that. So, that's where that's coming from. And even Mike, if you think about it, the landfill and our relationship with the county, we get paid for that, but they have made the comment, well, we're open to looking at billing. And what they mean is those are old agreements. So that may
Yeah,
be something that comes into play too.
sure.
Obviously, we don't want to lose money, and you don't really want to break even. You do want to have some, to put for other things too. So
Yeah. I
Let
think,
me,
I think a whole utility approach is definitely the way to go.
yeah.
and let me ask you this on your from your record keeping standpoint on your books. Um, do you track your plant in the balance sheet? How's your books look like in terms of like so on your are you booking your plant is it been capitalized on the books? Is there asset for electric, wastewater, water that are explicit in the books? Just and it could be in the whole in the utility. A lot of municipalities I look at will just have electric plant, one line, say it's $10,000 and that's it. And then you get into the co-op world, they're forced to be in full detail where they'll be like, here's electric plant, but it has everything. It's got what poles are, cost, the old historic cost of poles, it's got substation,
Yeah,
et cetera, because they have to follow RUS guidelines for lending requirements. Even if they're not RUS, now they borrow from CFC, but they still use the old methodology of accounting that the government is always asked for. But what's your books look like in terms of just from a muni standpoint? I'm not a municipality per se. I always find that sometimes a little iffy to have real decent, even the accounting for plants a little bit messy at times. So I'm just curious about that in general.
Yeah, we fall on the simple end of the scale. I mean, so our most detail comes out. We're required, through being a district, a special district, to do an end of the year audit, by an
Okay.
independent auditor. So that's
Okay.
even independent from the accountant that we use. That tends to be the most detailed financial statements that we get, which is good. I mean, it's not necessary to see those monthly, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And of course, those are available. They're public and can be shared with
Okay.
anybody doing a rate study. But it does break down some of the assets and
Good.
depreciation. They're not detailed to the point you're talking about, but that is the most detail
Yeah,
we
that would
get.
be
Yeah,
enough. I had to make some
yeah,
assumptions for
yeah,
allocation purposes, but I could do your system. I could run your system as the margin. What it gets at this, if you use plant, you can look at the each rate class as margins percent of plant, or you can look at it as revenue. They both fall pretty similar in nature, but the plant records might help in this case doing multi-departments if I need to deal with joint costing. Sometimes if there's like so much in plant in this department, that you might do your joint cost allocation based on plant
yeah,
on something on an expense. So it's helpful to have it. I would suggest probably to, when doing a study, do the test year that's something that conforms your last audit.
yeah. We could do that.
That's what I would do on it, just because then I have the audit records to go along with it, and everything's been audited. It's probably best, I think, in the situation with the multi departments.
Yeah, I think so too. No, and I've seen, where we even you like you said, Craig, you value assets and buildings and land and equipment and items like that too. We don't even get that detail, but that audit would give us some insight,
Yes.
allow us to do a better job with that.
Yeah, it just might help again if I'm having to deal with some allocation methodologies, knowing that the external accountants have classified, because typically they have like a supplemental statement here where they're saying there's this much plant in electric, this much in water, this much in wastewater. It may just be one or two lines, but that's
Right.
all I would need in reality.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we could supply that.
That's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking, I know I can't get co-op detail in level, but if I have something, since I'm doing departmental where it's just departmental or high level, how much the dollar amount is, even if the auditor may have estimated it by some means or something, at least I have that to go by.
Yeah. No, we could certainly supply that. And I'm more confident now with every day goes by, we can supply the information, or if not right on hand, we get it in short order that we would need to get the study going and make it accurate too.
From a electric side of things, since you build based, a lot of people are buying based on what they are going to use as a block of energy? Is it sort of a buy-in to a certain category to get the discount? I'm assuming that I will, when you do that, they buy in these blocks and they're at some level. Do you actually have the meter? Do you do any, is there any like, you have the meter data, so they pay extra if they go above the block they build, right? They get the penalty. Okay, so yep, that's fine. You'll have the data to back up, even if you preset yourself in an area. I'm going to see that. Okay.
Yeah, we do that billing on an annual basis, end of the year. So we follow the calendar year for any overage billing.
Okay,
that's how that's set up too.
I'll need to know that part of it. What about Mike, from a production standpoint? Will I be able to figure your line losses? Do you keep a production report of kilowatt hours produced versus what's sold, or do you track that at all?
That was being tracked. I'm not sure if we're still doing that, John, or if you have that rolling.
The only
yet.
thing I've seen, Mike, is I didn't see any formal reports. The only thing I could say was close to that was, from the readings from the data logger.
Yep.
But I haven't seen any reports produced that show that. That's something I would want to know too, and I've looked for them, but I don't see any formal production reports. I would, certainly like to be able to analyze that and know that too.
Yeah, so I mean, if we don't, we'll work around stuff on things, but it's always nice to know. You can do a study without it. It's nice to know what you're dealing with from a line loss. You're small, I know, so you probably don't have a lot of issue there, but it's nice to know, like, if a lot of munis, like smaller ones I work with, typically have a high line loss issue. But you may not have the same problem. I don't know on the thing and stuff. It just depends. What your voltage being different, that's a little different animal, essentially.
Yeah, we're running 3-phase motors to reduce our capacitance on the system and different things. But really, all in all, it costs the same amount of money to produce. X amount of kilowatt hours when we're running the small generator. The only time that changes is when the load goes up and we need to increase production for that specific load. Or something like that. That's the time that, things change.
Okay.
And then I have one more question. So, and it was asked earlier, is there a way that we can break this study down and say, so we get done with the study, is there a way we could break out the commercial and say, for some unknown reason, they're no longer on the system, and it's just left to the residents and the vacation people? And can we break that out? Is that going to be something that's going to be easy to do?
Yeah, because if I do the allocation and I got the commercial broken out, I know what margin they're producing based on the allocation. You'd lose their revenue plus the margin you'd have to make up for. And so simply looking at the margin they produce, no, that's if it's a subsidy per se, whatever it is, that's the subsidy that have to be added on to rates on top of just losing that load.
Sure. Gotcha.
So yeah, the results of the study bear that out.
Okay. And that would probably take into account the changing of generators and doing all the different things for that. Okay. Cool. What else do we have?
It may be a little complex on the changing a generator type of stuff. We'll have to think about how we want to deal with that, because it sounds like the generator changing obviously is driven by the seasonal component coming in, plus the commercial layered on top. From an allocation standpoint, I need to think about that a little bit as I'm doing allocation.
Okay.
But we look at everything on a month-to-month basis, so you can sort of you're saying the lower months you have the lower the lower generate. So everything I'll be looking at, it's on a month-to-month basis. I might need to be cognizant of those costs, essentially, from dropping in from off season to peak season.
Okay.
That's what I'm about to do.
Okay.
It's all annualized up, but there maybe have to be some different weighting factors and stuff based on season.
Okay. What's our next step, Craig? as far as a proposal, being a public special district, we have to do an RFP, so we're gonna have to talk to some other
Okay.
people. What's your thoughts on the next steps? What do we need to do next with you guys to keep moving forward here?
Well, so if you're gonna have to go to the folks, I'm assuming you're have to do like you said, a formal proposal on some stuff. So you'll want to submit an RFP to folks, and us and things, and then basically that set it up with a time frame when you want to what you want done. If you want to look at all departments, in from the cost service standpoint, sort of label your scope out of things you're looking for, in the study, and then you'll want to submit that out to folks that that you want to bid on, ask for a price point on it, and such, and give a time frame of when you want that responded to, and sort of the time frame that you're wanting the project done by as well. Anybody that's wanting to get in wants to know, sort of what your expectations are going into the projects as far as when deadlines would need to be. And
Okay.
basically how I respond is basically say, here's what our current workflow is, what we can manage, and how many weeks it would be to get the thing done. Try to mirror it up as best I can. If I have issues with your time frame, I'd probably say something initially, from my perspective when we're submitting and stuff, and give a price point and just say, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, because that's the kind of, when we're sitting here trying to decide what kind of deadline we want to put on it, it'd be good to know if you kind of had an idea based on what you know from us now. How long do you think it would take you to complete a study?
I always tell folks, because obviously you're not the only project I'm working on, that it takes me about 90 to 120 days after I get all data needed.
Okay.
And that's the key thing. It's like, as long as, the key things up front is you get a data request, and you got to get the data back out. Yours being a little unique, you got to understand you might have an initial data request and have some follow-up after that. So it might take a little more time working through the data up front. So keep that in mind in the scheduling process. Because
realistically, I could see that happening. Yeah, I could see that as extending.
Like Mike, with a co-op that's been around using standard accounting and all this stuff, and how it works, you're almost guaranteed that you get a data request out. Accounting and the billing folks and all the folks associated with it are going to be able to turn it around in like 14 days, and you're on the fly at that point in time, because it's all so standardized. You guys aren't and that's I'm not being critical. You're just not standard, basically, on that type of stuff. So it's going to be get a little bit to get to know each other, looking at the data. Hey, this is what I have for this that you're asking for. Does this look right? Yay or nay type of thing. Could you add something to it? There's going to be a little bit of working with each other up front.
Sure.
Yeah. One thing I'll add too, Mike and Craig, since I missed the public noticing today, we talked about another meeting. I don't know how the rest of the board feel about what we did the first time, where Craig was part of the normal board meeting. That's something we could look at, Mike. I just hit me there too. And then it does take, it is not a different meeting at noon. I think our next meeting, it is actually going to be 10th of January at noon. So that's something we could propose to the board, Craig, if that may fit into your schedule.
You say 10th of January?
Yeah, our next one is January 10th at 12 noon Mountain Standard Time.
I can make that one calendar wise.
And it is going to be up to the board. It's not, my decision, but I would certainly, after this, email that out. And that way it does allow, the public's going to attend anyway. And we don't have, we're done with our budget, and that would, fill the time for the meeting. So that may be something we should consider, at least given as an option,
And, and make sure, when the way our conversation went, I know you're looking for some feedback. I mean, from an RFP request for proposal standpoint, you're wanting a comprehensive study. It's not just simply revenue requirement. You're wanting the look at the revenue requirement over some time frame. We talked about forecasting out, looking at when the big expenses are coming capital wise. You're wanting to do a revenue requirement analysis for the whole system, and you're wanting to do the cost service study allocation to the rates basically. And finally, there will be rate design. It's always studies are basically built on the three principles: a full comprehensive big picture, how much money we need to operate and maintain the system, cover our costs so we are positive in a cash flow perspective. Two, allocation, taking the cost and allocating them to the rate classes to determine if there's equitability issues in the rates. And finally, design rates for each class that help mitigate, set the proper price point to help mitigate costs within the class. Basically, that becomes an issue of fixed cost versus variable cost recovery rate wise, whether you're picking it up at all kilowatt hours, if that's fine, or you need some fixed charge along with that to cover your costs appropriately.
Yeah, no, we're starting, from scratch. I mean, Mike, to my knowledge, there's never been a rate study done. I think the attempts were, from copying other utilities, which is the way to go. I mean, that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it would kind of be starting, with a complete body makeover, hair, teeth, nose, everything there, if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
So,
Well, back in the day when they started things here, it was just, we need to keep diesel in the generators, and we've got this consumer base.
Yeah.
And now the consumer base has changed over the years. We added commercial, we added, a lot more transient type vacation homeowners, and it's changed, and there's some diversity there that needs to be accounted for.
Yeah. And that's what the cost analysis is going to do for you, because you guys, you look at your own budgeting and stuff and things, sort of like when you're not making the money to cover, or at point when you're just an overall rate adjustment, we look at that, but then we get in the weeds a little bit more from there. How does it look from each class basically is really goal. And should we have different rates for this and that type of deal? That's what we're getting at here.
Well, and Mike brought this up earlier too, is that there's still a business design to incentivize new people here.
Yes.
We have an aging population, and it just is what it is. And some of them are dying off. They have in the last year, and that. So there's still that future. So Mike, I agree. There, anything in a rate design, if it has anything wiggle room or whatever for incentives. If that makes sense, Craig, that would be something that's relevant too, because for TUID to survive, there has to be growth. And there's always been the idea that, like Mike said, there's been plans from day one, and I've seen them going way back too, that were golf courses, baseball field, equestrian centers. That never has happened. And I think the energy has been prohibitive in that. But the old same with real estate, they're not making any more of it. One day that's going to happen in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I would like it to be in my lifetime, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But, we need to plan for that too.
It's like Craig said earlier, we may come up with a scientific cost for a service, but it might not fit our needs this time. So we might have to say, well, this is our baseline.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit. We'll work towards that.
Yeah.
And being proactive.
Yeah.
But there may be some of this we can't just because we might run people clear out of there.
No, you got
to want to do that.
You got to keep them in mind that the sciences can be cold and not like, I'm trying to say here, the science says something, but just in your nature, you can't necessarily do everything. It's good to have the scientific done to know where you're at, but you may not be able to convert rates that way completely. Like you said, you do a little at a time, but you have to keep in mind if you're wanting to grow and stuff, ideally for you guys, which is difficult, is really you need more baseline load that's there year round, but that's not the way you are at this point in time. So it really, you're seasonal in the sense none of your commercials driven on seasonal too. You don't have anything that's just a lot of baseline folks using consistently. That's how you that's how you cure some of the that's how your rates would be cured over time if you had more load, basically just consistent.
Yeah.
Well, and that's,
Yeah.
we're remote and that's not going to change quickly. And it's the chicken and the egg debate. Yeah, you have to value how much an incentive is going to make a difference. I call it the price for paradise jokingly. And what I mean by that is you trade off, you get here in a remote area and there's a lot of freedom that goes with that.
Yeah.
But, services, like you talked about, cost of services and goods go up with that. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
something, yeah, we're not going to escape that at any time. So that's going to always be a factor. That's what anybody's going to have to
But the
understand
people
too.
there have to have power. I mean, you gotta be able to
Exactly.
get power. I mean, otherwise that defeats
Yeah.
no one's wanting to probably live out there in even in the peak year in the tent
Yeah.
outside and stuff. They
Yeah.
like having their home and having their
Yeah.
their utility type of stuff. So
Got it. Yeah. Got to have
Well, and I
the
think,
comforts.
the information that we're gonna get out of this, I hope, um, will be, if we can bring the community and the commercial and everybody together and say, this is what it is, this is what it's gonna cost, this is what it should cost. And then if we can start figuring out ways to make changes to where it works for everybody and everybody can work together, that would be top of my list right now.
Well, I think that this report, this study would at least give you the baseline that you could work some strategy off of, basically. That's really what it is. It's almost like a rate strategy. These studies, they're a snapshot to some extent because you're looking at maybe the one forecast year, but you can go out like 5 years. So it gives you a baseline to look off of, and then you're going back and saying, okay, this is what we need to do, sort of planning purpose wise.
Sure.
That's what it's going to end up being. It's a planning document, just like a work plan in nature. It's a financial planning document.
Yeah.
Good.
Good deal. No, let's Mike, like I said, I would propose that to you guys after the meeting via email and see where we go from there. And our goal is, sooner rather than later,
Sure.
to get things going so we could see how we proceed from there with the RFP process and the things we have to do on our end. I think Craig's given a lot of good information, and for me, it's the direction we want to head with the questions that we had too. So it would certainly benefit us to have that baseline.
I mean, the thing about RFPs, they're confidential. Like when I get them, in terms from other things, I'd be happy to share them, but I have to cut out or blackline some stuff out of it. And be able to redact it where you guys couldn't see who it came from, but I have plenty of wording of different RFPs, but you are more unique. I mean, give you a sense of what they look like.
Yep.
And Mike might already have something like that. I don't know, but if there is, we've obviously have so many we've replied to that in things that I have different ones from munis and stuff that I can share.
Yeah, I like to see them. I'm a fan of, not reinventing the wheel, Craig.
Yeah.
If we can copy language that somebody smarter than me has spent time to come up with, and then put in specifics, then certainly
Yeah.
I'd like to see that. Even redacted would probably be a big help.
Yeah, because at least you're gonna. If I get to, at least you have an idea of a structure one that I've seen out there. I might give you a couple different ones to look
Okay,
at
yeah, that'd be great.
stuff. But let me dig, and I can send Mike something on that, and you guys can look at that.
Yeah, certainly. No, I'd appreciate that. That would be a huge help too.
And then maybe is there some outlet in Utah that we could use to advertise that with, John, just to see if we can get some more interest? Cautiously optimistic that there's not going to be a lot of companies looking at a company our size.
No, it's tough. I mean, we can reach out to people individually, and then that there's a site that TUID used initially for the posting for the management is the only the one I know of that's official. And maybe just reach out. Some of the utilities shared some rate studies with a few folks for the fuel surcharge. Through UAMPS. Maybe reaching out to them and inviting them to that if they want to. They may not. I mean, we can't make them, but that's the process, and as long as we follow it, then we've satisfied. Yeah, our diligence, exactly.
Yep.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
I think that's all the questions I have for you, Craig. I appreciate your time.
No problem. I'll get those, get you some redacted things out, and I'm gonna jump off. I need to. My assistant Lolly has just messaged me. I forgot I had a 2 o'clock call.
Oh, man.
Okay.
She's
No.
holding the fort down as I talk, so I need to jump over there.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Craig, and I'll
Guys.
share this recording with the rest of the board, and any follow-up questions, I'll just email you on their behalf, or they may too. So we certainly appreciate it. It's been enlightening, so appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Good afternoon, guys. Thank you.